At the stakeholders meeting, Richard Bennett handed his 17-year-old son, Tyler, $10 million in shares, then turned to me with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Marcus can go earn his own," he said. Laughter rolled around the glass and steel boardroom like broken china. I kept my hands flat on the table so no one would see them shake. That's the thing about marrying into money. You're invited into the club, then reminded daily that you don't belong. I loved Sophia. Her family? They loved the idea of themselves. Richard, my charming father-in-law, treated me like gum on a loafer. Margaret perfected the art of the velvet insult. Tyler, crowned since birth, spoke to me like I'd wandered in from the service entrance. Meanwhile, I built a real career, logistics consulting, unsexy, profitable, mine. So I took Richard's punch on the chin. Then my lawyer, Daniel Cross, quietly stood. "With your permission," he said, voice surgical, "I need to address the board. It concerns ownership." The room cooled 10 degrees. Daniel opened a manila folder with the reverence of a detonator. Charles Bennett, this company's founder, placed 25% of Bennett Industries in a trust. Those shares are not Richard's. They were designated by Charles for a specific heir. Richard smirked. Tyler preened. Daniel didn't blink. "The heir is Marcus Hale." Silence. Then Richard exploded. Accusations, threats, the works. Daniel waited it out, then laid down the next card. "Signed, notarized, witnessed, video testimony. Handwriting verified by 3 experts. And one more point, Richard concealed this. Stake from the board for years. That is a breach of fiduciary duty and potentially criminal." Phones appeared like prairie dogs. Investors started calculating. Tyler's smile curdled. Margaret's mascara slipped. Sophia looked at me like, "I'd just switched languages." "I didn't know," I told her, and meant it. I'd met Charles 3 times. He was the only Bennett who ever asked about my company and actually listened. Chaos ate the rest of the agenda. When the room finally exhaled, Daniel snapped his briefcase shut. "We'll file in the morning. Mr. Hale's voting rights and board representation are effective immediately." For the first time in that building, Richard wasn't the loudest gravity in the room. By sundown, my phone was a siege engine. The consultant who inherited an empire headlined 3 sites. I turned it off and met Daniel. "Charles didn't just leave you equity," Daniel said, sliding over another stack. "He left control mechanisms, voting trusts, proxy agreements. If you want to lead, the door's open." I slept like a man who'd been hit by a truck and woke up driving it. A week later, I walked back into that same boardroom. Last time, a punchline. This time, a stakeholder. Richard looked 10 years older. The others looked careful. They asked for my view of operations. I didn't give them a speech. I gave them numbers. Northeast distribution is running at 60% efficiency. Outdated routing. Warehouses stuck in the Clinton era. We're burning $12.3 million annually we don't need to. We modernize. Transport costs dropped 30% within 18 months. The room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when money is listening. "And your growth thesis?" an investor asked. I put up a map. Charles left notes on a pivot he couldn't time back then. Now we can. "We use our logistics backbone to build a renewable energy logistics business, solar, wind, storage, and become the supply chain that carries green power across New England." Richard sputtered. "We move boxes, not build solar farms." "We become what we choose," I said, meeting his eyes. "That's what your father understood." The vote, 8-2 in favor. At home, Sophia's armor finally cracked. "Why didn't you tell me how bad it was?" "I tried," I said. "You were raised to call cruelty standards." Charles saw it. He chose to protect the future from the past. She sat with that. For once, she didn't defend them. 6 months in, the numbers made their own speeches. Logistics savings beat plan. The renewable division turned from slide deck to revenue line. Staff scores climbed. Clients stayed. 1 year to the day after Richard told me to earn my own, I stood at the head of his old table and unveiled what Charles had drawn in the margins 20 years ago. The Northeast Green Corridor, I said, the map lighting up. Boston to D.C., a spine of solar fields, wind installations, battery hubs, and us, the circulatory system moving the energy reliably, profitably. It's a 2.7B 5-year build, I said plainly. Projected returns a 10B annually by 2030. Funding? 3 institutional partners already papered for minority stakes. Governance? Covered under the founder's trust provisions. Richard rasped that it was reckless. Margaret flipped to the bylaws. Marcus has authority to negotiate subject to ratification. The vote. 9-1. Only Richard stood against the tide his father had set in motion. Afterward, he approached, dignity frayed. "You've destroyed my legacy." "No," I said. "You did when you chose to coast and to belittle the people rowing. I'm building what your father started." He didn't have an answer for that. Ground broke on our first wind logistics hub that fall. The stock hit an all-time high. Pension funds tripped over themselves to join Phase 2. Tyler sulked at Harvard with a smaller trust and a larger education in reality. Margaret discovered. I returned calls. Sophia stopped watching me through her family's eyes and started watching the business work. And Richard? He kept his board seat and his volume low. I framed one quote on my office wall, across from the skyline Charles wanted me to shape. "Go earn your own." Turns out, I already had. The outsider became the architect. The future, ours, wasn't inherited. It was built.